Praveen, I really appreciate you making time to have this conversation with me today.
Mike, great to be here. Thanks for the chat.
I'd love to start with where you are right now. I mean, people have heard your introduction and the incredible career that you've had leading up to this point, from being an entrepreneur all the way through to becoming a private equity investor. And I know that in the space of investment, that one of the things that is really top of mind and that you love to talk about is impact investing. And I'd love to understand, as a starting point, like, how do you see impact investing?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think it's also important just to talk a little bit about how we got there, right? So in my 20s, after I did my CPA and joined my family office, working with my father and my brother, we had a casino company, and a very successful casino company. It was a lot of fun, made good money. And then wind the clock forward, three things kind of happened. One was just through age and experience, learning that just because something's legal doesn't mean it's good or right. And no disrespect to many people that make their living in a legal industry, say like gaming, it just didn't fit our values. And around the same time, our daughter, Jaya, was born, and then our son, Anish. And so having two beautiful children in my life really impacted how I not only looked at business, but the planet. Because then you're thinking about how do you use business as that tool to create sustainable changes to make the planet better for them and future generations. Charity and philanthropy is important and needed, but the sustainable business is how we're going to fix the air, the soil, the ocean, plastic, that kind of thing. And then the third thing was, you get a little bit longer and in age, you start thinking about things like legacy. So, I started questioning, like, what's my role on the planet? Why do I really exist? When I die, is anybody going to care? Is anybody going to show up at my funeral? What are they going to say about you, right? You're a proud Sauder alum, as am I. And when Robert Lee, died, there were thousands of people at his funeral, right? I was in the overflow in the Hotel Vancouver ballroom. So a lot of people came to pay their respects to this, wonderful man who lived this incredible life. And some of them probably didn't ever meet him or even know him well, but they were there, right? So that's the kind of life I think a lot of people should aspire to. I know I do. And then specifically what happened was, one of the first businesses that was our first impact investment was in Victoria, a company called Carmana. And we helped build it into Canada's largest solar company. And it was a rocket ship ride. It went from a startup to 75 million revenues in 5 years. It was basically doubling almost every year. It was a public company on the stock exchange with a 10x return. And this was in 2000. So this was basically, the accidental serendipitous start to impact investing before it was even a word or a thing. And I turned to my family and said, I got to make this a focus because if you can do good and make money, obviously it's a no-brainer, right? And I've found that impact investors, impact entrepreneurs, just the impact community is just filled with lovely people, that high bar of someone you invite to your house for dinner, right? So we're quite well known as a sort of impact investment shop. And we probably have 24 businesses. Each one I've explained to what it does. And more importantly, it's why. You go, that's amazing. And then you've got your daughter, Lily. She's, growing up quickly like ours did. But the Dr. Seuss book, The Lorax, awesome book and movie. And we actually have copies of it at the office. So we'll actually tell people that, we're at risk of becoming a real live Lorax. Like this guy, had it right many years ago when he wrote this book. And there's another friend who works in the impact space who's well known, Joel Solomon. And, he and I, sometimes when we're on panels, we talk about, we shouldn't even differentiate between investing and impact investing. By definition, all investing should be impact investing, because if not, we're all bleeped, right? So, yeah.
Well, interesting. I mean, all investing is impact investing. It's just, if you're not conscious of it, the impact could be quite negative and harmful to the planet, right?
Exactly.
And so I think, it's actually the reason that we decided to become a B Corp as a company, right, which we did in 2018. And we realized that, we've got a footprint on the earth. We have an effect on the environment as a company. We have lots of stakeholders. We're in a community. We're actually in communities all over North America now. We've got team, we have clients, we've got the charities we support, and all are impacted by the decisions that we make as a company. And so that was what actually drove us down the road of becoming a B Corp and then recertifying in 2023. And then we're recertifying again in 2025, actually, is the next time we recertify. And each time what we're trying to do is raise the positive level of our impact, right, and figure out what can we do differently that can improve how we're showing up as a triple bottom line company.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Kudos to you and your team for, taking that initiative and trying to refine it and take it to the next level.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because if we think government's going to fix this for us, like this is all going to be, a Paris Accord or whatever it is, and we don't think about the fact that a small business employs more people across Canada in total than all the large businesses, right? So if you've got a small business and you make the decision to care about the impact that you make on the earth, and if everyone did that, that's going to have a pretty fundamental effect on our future. And as you say, like this is the future that we're handing to our children, and we are making those decisions for them now. They don't get to make the decisions. They're basically either the beneficiary or of that decision, or they're at the detriment of the decisions that we're making.
Totally. Yeah. And then, and for sure, entrepreneurs and businesses like you're talking about, but also right down to the consumer level, like voting with your wallet, right?
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, like, I look at making decisions on the products that we buy as a family. And, sometimes that decision means that the item might cost a little bit more, but I know the downstream harm that the other purchase is going to make for the difference of $1, right?
Yeah.
When you multiply it out by the total revenue and the total volume of that product, it's a significant, cost on the earth. And I think there's lots of different ways that we can think about this. I'm curious, as you talk to your family about this and you moved into impact investing, you're also incredibly well connected and you do a lot of public speaking. I'm curious what it's been like for you to spread that message outside of the investments that your family office makes.
Yeah, I guess a lot of the speeches I've done and talks I've done are, in the impact community. So I'm actually kind of preaching to the converted already.
Converted, yeah.
So, and I do a lot of talks at, to students, UBC, SFU. Saturday I was with 40 high school students, and it's actually quite inspirational to see that a lot of the, younger generation, the next generation, they already get it. Right. And so, for them, I think they get a kick out of seeing, someone who's older, who's, become a leader in the space. So now we're kind of like passing the torch down to the next gen to hopefully, keep this going, because we have no choice. Otherwise we move into Mars.
Right. And how has that impacted how you raise your children? Because you've got two phenomenal kids that are both successful in their own rights for different reasons. Like, how has that mindset impacted how you've raised them?
So, they were basically born and raised in this whole period where we've been doing impact investing. So Jay is, 24. She was born in 2000. That's when we started Carmana. So they've just seen how, our family office has been, focusing and working on projects like this. When she was 10, and we would like drag him into some of these things. So when she was 10, we started an initiative called Down to the Last Straw. And it was kind of a fun grassroots sort of initiative to teach people, educate them around single-use plastic, especially straws, and then to give them tips on what to do. So it was as simple as when you go to a bar or restaurant, when you order a drink, tell them to not give you a straw, right? Mm-hmm. Stop before it comes. And because at home, you never use a straw, right? Mm-hmm. So it used to drive me nuts, like, every freaking bar and restaurant, and it was inconsistent, some places with the soft drink or the drink, and other places with the water. And so, you walk into a restaurant with this, cute little girl, and you get some interest and attention. And this isn't really that public because we've never really, done anything with it. But, we got organizations like A&W, Practice Club, I can go on and on some of these big chains, because we're talking to restaurants one at a time, and then we're like, how do we get more impact?
Right.
And so, we would say, look, if you change your straw policy from starting every drink without a straw, and then if someone asks for something, giving an alternative to it, three things happen. One, you're helping the planet, right? The environment. Mm-hmm. Two, this is what consumers want to see now anyways, right? So you're kind of leading. And then three, you're going to save money. Like, you think it would be a no-brainer, right? And then, probably 3-4 years into this, sort of grassroots level movement, all of a sudden the whole world, this tipping point got reached where everybody was talking about straws. And yeah, we're not going to just change the planet, from just that one thing, but it's just to have more people thinking about other ways to get into the circular economy and use less plastic. And then even our, mutual friend, David Katz, started that business, Plastic Bank. And so I was kind of helping him at the beginning because he knew I was sort of on this anti-plastic straw, campaign. But yeah, and for Jaya, she's just carried on into it. Even her diet choices changed. She became vegetarian and vegan. And her current business is called Tidra Labs. And they're basically taking organic waste And it came out of UBC, scientists there invented it. But they'll take organic waste, so things like orange peels, shrimp shells, seaweed, and they'll use salt water opposed to fresh water, which is also an advantage. And they're making textiles out of it to make clothing. Because the clothing industry is also the biggest, dirty polluting industries on the planet, with all the plastic and microfibers and the dyes and the chemicals, that kind of thing. It's fun to see that she's out there raising money and do all the things that entrepreneurs have to do to change the world.
There's a great example of a lot of people would have gone a different route, which instead of saying, let's abolish straws, they'd say, well, let's make straws out of recycled material or recyclable material. Let's make them out of bamboo. Let's make them out of paper, which all of those things occurred. Yeah. Let's make them metal. But what that ignores is the fact that you still have to produce the product. So whether or not there's a downstream effect of there not being plastic, all the energy still goes into making the product, even if it's of a different out of a different material. And I love that you're like, why do we need the straw in the first place? You don't use them at home. Yeah. Why are they showing up in restaurants? And so I love that through those efforts that you really has changed. Like I don't even remember the last time it was given or offered a straw in a restaurant. And before, you started down this road and the world sort of caught up, that wasn't that way.
Yeah, no, totally. And then, there's a lot of other small ways that, and you touched on, like if everyone makes a change and it all collectively adds up, right? So our local Dairy Queen, Simon loved our family because we would walk in, and when we got our sundaes, we'd walk in with a real spoon, right? and you'd see, people staring at this family, what are these, wackos, right? And then he's like, Praveen, if everybody did this, I would save so much money. He wasn't even thinking about the plastic side, right? But it doesn't really take that much, right, to, do a couple of these small sorts of things. And I think now people are doing that with water bottles, right? Everybody's carrying, like, I just saw you had your water bottle there. Right?
So, but, I can't get on a plane. Like I go into an airport and I'm like, there's bottled water everywhere, but they have these refill stations in every airport in the world pretty much, right? At least the developed world. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to have one water thing and I'm going to carry it with me everywhere. And before I get on the plane, after security, I fill it up with water. And then if I need more on the plane, I just ask the flight attendant to fill it up for me. And, what used to happen is that we as a family would buy all these water bottles to stay hydrated on the plane. And all this plastic got generated for really no purpose. Yeah, no. And I could go down this, rabbit hole, and I will actually for a few minutes because it's really interesting and important, but on water, right? So my sister-in-law, she's got a nice cabin at Paisley Island. And when you go there to visit, it's all well water, and they're really very particular about water and waste, right? So when you go to the bathroom, there's this expression, if it's yellow, you let it mellow, right? If it's brown, you flush it down. Right. And it got me thinking, that, why do we have two sets of rules? That's basically the city, right? Paisley's very close to Vancouver. And just because you can do something, meaning flush, doesn't mean you should, right? Mm-hmm. So our family of four, it's probably been about 10 years, we started following that here in our West Side house in Vancouver, right? And you just got to get past a bit of the ick factor. But, and then now we kind of, again, created this movement. We have a lot more families who are doing that here in Vancouver. And you never thought that we would have water shortages in Vancouver. And I called it like a number of years ago, like they're coming and it's like a regular thing, right? So water isn't this commodity, it's a scarce, precious resource. And unfortunately, there's going to be wars potentially over water, right? And one of our latest ventures is it's a fun one. So we have an opportunity to export water, bulk water from Iceland, where you and I visited last year, through tankers to parts of the world that need it. So my partner, we've got 2 ports we're kind of building out in the infrastructure so then we can actually, send water to places that need it. Because Iceland has a ton of fresh, clean water, and a lot of it just gets wasted, goes back to the oceans. So that's sort of a latest venture that we're working on. That and some of the water, how it started was to bring water to Canada, because a lot of First Nations, unfortunately, still don't have clean drinking water, right? Which just is a shame. So part of the plan is to bring water to Canada. So that's what drove your daughter forwards. And now what about your son?
So Anish, he's 22, 2 years younger. And, it's fun to see because he's also an entrepreneur, and he started even earlier. So he was at West Point Grade Academy, and he's in grade 10, and music's always been his passion. And so he came home one day, and he's very casual and nonchalant about it. But he's like at dinner, it's like, I made $5,000 US today, right? And like that's working part time, for what you're in school all day, right? And he was basically a Spotify influencer. So, by accident, he had some musicians approach him and say, look, can we put our song on your playlist for the exposure and we'll pay you, right? And he just started working it, and he realized, hey, it's like a search engine ranking thing. If you want to be the first song, pay me more, right? And then so he did that, and then he's the type of guy, how the A's work for the B's kind of thing, right? So another funny story, when I was on the Vancouver Police Foundation board, one of the new sort of bylaws that came in was they wanted homes in Vancouver to have their addresses written on the back in the alleys,
right,
for emergency response. Because everybody's got the address in the front, but most don't in the back. So I'm like, hey, Nish, this should be a great summer job. And so he goes to buy some supplies, and then, he does our house. And then, the next day he comes home, he goes, yeah, I've hired a couple of my friends to actually do the work. So I was like, and now his current venture, and he started during university, and he didn't actually even want to go to UBC. And I was actually okay with it. Anuja was not. And, because you and I have both met and seen, lots of people who have too much education who aren't successful, or, can know how to make money. And it's, analysis by paralysis, right? Mm-hmm. Or people like I had a former mate of mine in EO who was a high school dropout, and all the, drug addict, alcoholic, all that kind of stuff, cleaned up his act, multimillionaire, age 40, right? And so I've seen that, education isn't the be all and end all. And so I was kind of okay with it. And then my dad, because our whole family saw our dad went there, me, my brother, my sister, it was 5 or 8 grandkids, and the paternal grandfather in Hindi is Babaji. So Babaji put his foot down. He goes, Nish, you got to graduate, right? And so he's like, okay, I have no choice. And so, and we told him, like, just pass. You don't need to worry about your freaking grades, right? So he started his business while he was in university called Holder, Holdr. And then he graduated this past spring, and he's been running it full time now. But it's also in the music space. And, he's out there raising money. And actually last year, he ended up raising money from Ryan Holmes, from Hootsuite, right? And Manny Pata from their fund. All I know is when I was 21, I was working at White Spot, like flipping. Right. I wasn't raising money for anything. And I think part of the way they are wired is just some of the things that we, kind of imparted on when they're growing up, which was like, you have to have this attitude of gratitude, right? Every day, and ideally all day long. It's a choice thing. If you choose to look for it, there's something to be grateful for as soon as you wake up. You got clean water that we're talking about, a warm bed, food. And, a lot of people on the planet, they've had the basics, they're happy. And then because they've grown up in a different life and lifestyle with, private schools and clubs and travel all the world, we would say, hey, if you like this life and lifestyle, that's great, but you're gonna have to figure out how to do it for yourself. Right? We're not going to give it to you. So the most important thing we do is teach you, how to make money, ethically, impact investing, whatever, right? Then accomplish this for yourself. And a couple of the other concepts that we imparted to was, we'd say a job, JOB is an acronym that stands for just over broke. So, even if you're some partner at some, law firm, accounting firm, whatever, and you make, 400 or 500 grand and you pay half to our, people in Ottawa, and what happens there, the way our deficit is going, you're doing better than most, but to get to the level you aspire to, you need equity. Mm-hmm. So that's where they're like, okay, we need companies that we start or multiple companies and exit, right? And so, yeah, it's fun to see that, as I said, they were not only watching, absorbing, learning, growing up, but now they're applying. And then actually it's fun too, because now, they're out in the business community at events and networking. I just did a talk with my daughter on Friday. It was like a father-daughter fireside chat to 40 high school students. So I was like beaming like a, Cheshire cat, as they say.
I'm so glad you got them started so early, and they had the bug early enough, and they felt the confidence to go do it. I mean, I was 28 when I went down the entrepreneurial path, and I felt young and I felt old at the same time, because I thought, am I ready to go down this path this early at 28? And then I was also looking back on it, thinking to myself, why did I take so long to make the decision to go down that path? So it's kind of a weird sort of dichotomy on both sides. And I watched today, when we went to, so you mentioned Sauder, right? Your sister and I went to Sauder and graduated together. And that's actually originally how you and I met. And I remember when Bandana and I were there, like there was no entrepreneur class. Yeah. Like the literally coming out of Sauder and becoming an entrepreneur was almost seen as failure at that stage, right? Like you're going to business school because you're going to go off and do some sort of career in some big organization. And yet, as I made the decision to leave the corporate world at 28 and start down this entrepreneurial path, which has led to, incredible flexibility and has introduced me to the most amazing people. And I've been able to employ a lot of people over the last 24 years. I've learned a lot from the people that I've worked with, and it's provided a great life for me and my family, and also allowed me to give back at the same time. And totally. Had no idea that that was the journey that I was going to be on when I decided to do this. Right. And so I love that, and that you inspired, or at least both your kids felt inspired to be able to go down that path. And I hope for my daughter that if that's a path that she chooses, that she doesn't think she needs to wait to a certain point in her life when she's ready to do it. And I love that they started, before they were even out of school to get down that path, and that your family ethos had impact investing as part of it, so that they were thinking with that lens when they went down that road.
Yeah, no, I totally concur. I graduated, a few years ahead of you, but my year was the first year they actually started one class on entrepreneurship. And, you couldn't even pronounce it back then, let alone spell it, right? Or all other. Yeah. And you became an entrepreneur because because you were unemployable, right?
Right.
And then, it's taken some time, and now it's just, rock star profession. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Shows like Dragon's Den, Shark Tank, all these things have been, helped to popularize it. And then, so both my kids, they actually specialized in entrepreneurship. They did 2 full years of courses just around entrepreneurship. So now it's a specialization, not just a one course thing, right?
I love that. I wish that was around when you and I were there, more than just that one course, that there was the ability to actually specialize in that, because it ends up being like an incredible path if it's something that you're wired for. It's not without its risks. So, and I think that, I for one definitely thought it was a straight line. You just started a business and it was going to be a straight line experience. You set your strategy, you set your goals, and it's been anything but that. Starting in something and then realizing, well, this isn't actually the business. We got to transform and pivot the model. And then, going through a recession and then figuring out the other side of that, while building an industry, and then coming out of that and going into the pandemic. And there's all these factors that come at you. But I think, the earlier that somebody can, in their working career, can make that decision. And if there is the ability to go to a school that helps to offer the foundational things you need to know, so you're not stubbing your toe, because it's expensive when you're stubbing your toe in your own business. When you're doing it in an entrepreneurial course, when maybe you're still living at home, going to university, that's a much safer place to be making those mistakes.
Yeah, no, definitely the education is important, but also having, a network around you, and mentors. So there's a lot more of these things around to help people. Another concept that we use with both our kids when they're young was we always encourage them to try things, take chances, right? To fail. Basically, give them license to fail. Right. And so as entrepreneurs, we know like that, it's kind of like a muscle. You learn, okay, it wasn't fatal. Get up, get on. And so, that's been sort of, I think, part of their makeup as well. Like, okay, well, let's give it a shot.
So as you now move into this next phase of your career, you've moved, entrepreneurial journey, you're still an entrepreneur, but moved into the impact investing stage. And now you're starting to think about, you've been in philanthropy for a long time, but you're also thinking about legacy. As you look forward for yourself, what does legacy mean to you?
So a number of things. One of the first things would be, and I think you've probably seen the same way, is like your kids,
right.
Who are they, what they turn out to be, what do they accomplish, right? And so we've talked, a lot about that. Another thing for me is just charity and philanthropy in general, right? Because there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily investable. For example, one of the things that I'm most passionate about right now and working a lot on is a unique way to solve homelessness through a one-time sizable grant. So it's an organization called Foundations for Social Change. And, mom and dad growing up, they always imbibed in us to give back. And, when you have little, you just give little, and you have more, you give more. And, earlier on might be more time, later on it can include more money. But I also found that our giving, where we spent time, evolves as you go through life. So when the kids are young, it's all about Children's Hospital, right? Because you go in there all the time, right? Or education causes like Room to Read that we were involved with for 15 years. And then as you get a little older, it's about, Vancouver General Hospital and, St. Paul's, that kind of stuff. But the last, say, 5-6 years, we've done 2 things. One, we brought a lot of our giving and charity and philanthropy back home versus overseas. And there's so much need and demand everywhere. And, it's it's too much sometimes. But there's so many issues at home, right? So now we're thinking, okay, charity begins at home, so we got to fix some of these issues here because we live here, our kids are growing up here, and then we've kind of moved more into things like homelessness. And it actually started with Covenant House. So Manny Pata, a good friend, he told me that I was going to sleep on the street, right? And I'm like, dude, I don't even camp, but whatever, I can do this for one night. And literally, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. So I don't do cold well. You love skiing. I don't ski because it's got cold and wet. And it's late November, and you can try and bundle for the cold, but to actually sleep on concrete, like literally was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I didn't even make it one night. And I took 2 pieces of cardboard, not that it made a difference, but my lower back, my neck were killing me. And after a couple hours, I would have to sit or stand or walk around. Actually, I took a group of friends and we went for pizza on me. I go, let's go kill a few hours, do a pizza, right? And the next day, I had a nap, Nugent booked me a massage. And then you think about these, kids that have to do this every night, right? They're worried about their stuff, get lost or stolen in the bathroom, they got to function the next day, right? And then my personality approach, I think you know me well, is if I put my name on something, I'm going to crush it, right? And so, this sleep on the street thing is a fundraiser, an awareness thing, and you get your little thermometer to track your progress. And over 6 months, I was the number one fundraiser all the way through, broke the record for a one-night fundraiser raise. And then the day of the event, Thursday, Anuja texts me at noon. She goes, honey, somebody's above you. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I've been number one all the way through, and the day of the event, like, someone's above me. And so what happened, I won't name names, but, another fellow that was sleeping out, his family foundation kicked in like $50K for him, right? Right. So he was above me. And then, my competitive juices, right? That's where it came out. I'm like, well, I could take out my checkbook. And then both my father and Anuja said, like, honey, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Like, you broke the record, you created all this awareness. I had like friends signing up for the, next year, that kind of thing. And so I guess I've never felt as good to come in second for something because maybe their competitive juices came in and that was another $50K more for the kids, right? And then, when you develop this reputation as a crusher, you get more asks. So all of a sudden, all these people at Covenant House, like, who's this Praveen guy? And then, we're doing this capital campaign. Can you join our committee? And I'm like, how do you say no to that? So I was on the committee and helped, with the 2 new buildings that they built up. And that kind of led to Foundations for Social Change. And so we're basically trying to affect change by taking this unique entrepreneurial approach to solving homelessness by finding people that are what we call the invisible homeless. So just like an iceberg, the visible homeless is what we see. That's the tip. And unfortunately, they have other issues like mental health, addiction. And the invisible homeless is a lot more people. So people that couch surf, sleep in their cars, rely on generosity of friends and strangers, or even don't want the label of homeless. So we're trying to catch them before they become visible. And so what we've been doing, and it's all backed by data and analytics, UBC's involved, we'll give them $8,500 cash. And it's not a loan, it's a grant. It's free money. It's given with love, respect, trust, dignity. We don't tell people what to do. They instinctively know what to do, right? And so you play poker, right, Mike? A little bit?
I mean, I know how to play poker. Okay. Let's say that. Yeah.
So the analogy I use is, when you're playing poker and you have a big set of chips in front of you, you just play a strong, confident hand. Hey, I'm going to match you and double you or whatever, right? Yeah. And then when you're down to a few chips, you play weak and meek and timid because, if you lose them, you're out of the game.
Right.
So unfortunately, these people are playing the game of life with very few or no poker chips. So we're trying to restack, the deck for them. Right. And now it's basically Maslow's hierarchy needs. So they know, okay, I don't have to chase my next meal. Like, I'm good for a while. I don't have to worry about where I'm going to sleep. My rent's covered for a while. Actually finding accommodation, that's a whole nother, conversation. You can get the suit for the job interview. And so we're getting amazing ROI where so many of these people are getting, back into the game of life, back being productive members of society. And so I was the chair of this $4 million raise to kind of prove out this model. And the end goal of this was to affect policy change, to go to various levels of government or large organizations and attract, more investment. And we're a registered charity, but I don't even like the word charity. Like, we're an impact organization. And I don't like the term donors, but that's what we need, but we call them investors. So it's more like taking that approach how I run my business life. I'm running a startup company that's entrepreneurial. I need to raise money from investors. And then we want to apply what we've been successfully doing here in 2 other areas of society that we think we can run the same model on. The second one is youth that age out of the foster system, right? So without a bit of sort of, help, they're, one step away from Covenant House, right? And then the third one is incarcerated people being released back into society.
Right.
So if we can, apply this to them as well, it will give them that hand up versus a handout. It's just, Morgan Freeman walks out in Shawshank Redemption with suitcase. He's looking left, right. Dude, you're one step away from being homeless, right? So when you talk about legacy, if we can impact society with, some unique approaches like we're doing here, and this isn't a company to invest in. This is a charity or impact organization. Like I would feel super proud that, I had my part with, all the other great people working on this, to make some change. And we're seeing, unfortunately, homelessness growing throughout North America. And, the pandemic, we really saw that wealth gap really get much bigger and wider, right? And the middle class is shrinking, it's being pushed to the bottom end, and the fabric of society is ripping. And it's not going to end well, right? So during feudal times when the peasants were starving, there was a run on the castle, right? And you can't blame them. Desperate people will do desperate things. If you're starving, got to feed your family, you're going to shoplift, you're going to break in the car. Unfortunately, we don't have, the same gun culture like in the States. And selfishly, like Anuja was born in Nairobi, Kenya, and a lot of people there will live behind barbed wire fence homes with vicious guard dogs, as opposed to, a fluffy Labradoodle or, like your dog. And so I don't want to be in this society where I'm, dystopian, looking over my back all the time. Actually, I have a friend, a neighbor 2 blocks from me. He's concerned when he goes to bank machines because he walks out. He's like, who's watching me walk out with his wad of cash? Right. And so we think there isn't a resource problem. We think there's a resource allocation problem. There's enough to go around. Right. We've got to move the pieces and parts together to impact change. So, but that's the kind of stuff that gets me jazzed and impact investing, working on things like this every day to kind of get up and do what I do. So I find it's not so much about me. It's about all these external things around me that drive me. And then, sorry, I'm talking a lot here, but, just my views on money. When I was in my forum group with EO, we had this conversation around, do you have a financial target you're trying to get to? And I did. And then, one day I'm thinking, well, why do we even have a target? So I'm wired to make as much money as I can, not because I have this, crazy ass life and lifestyle, but it's more about, seeing money as a tool and energy. It's like water. You got to let it flow. You can't block it, damn it, hoard it, right? And I think in terms of sort of 4 buckets. So my first bucket is a full life and lifestyle bucket, right? And it's chasing experiences versus stuff. And, a small example, something we taught the kids was, when you have a full lifestyle bucket, you go to a restaurant and order whatever you want, right? And it may not seem like a big thing, but it is. I mean, you do look at the price just out of interest sake, but, if you want whatever you order, right? So anyways, full lifestyle bucket. My next bucket, I'm trying to keep full, is my charity philanthropy bucket. And so I'm trying to make more so I can give away more. And as my good friend Dave Richardson, one day we're having lunch, he was telling me about how he'd set up his foundation with his wife Pamela, and he goes, Praveen, we are having so much fun giving away this money with a warm hand, right? Versus when we're dead and gone, can't even see what happened to it. I'm like, Dave, you just hit the nail on the head. Like, this is why I love mentoring and donating and doing all things, because it's my endorphin hit. Like, I've never done like drugs, but that's like my good drug. So I get the hit, I gotta do something else. And I'm super proud. I think you may know this, but if not, mom and dad had done, a lot at UBC and Sauder, and now Anuj and I have done something fairly significant as well. So this new building's being built. There's going to be a floor named after me. That's going to be a Center for Entrepreneurship and Impact. And part of our gift also is funding a experiential learning program to help students that are taking the CDL, Creative Destruction Labs course, learn how to be investors and venture capitalists, right? So it's kind of a parallel to the PMF program. So, and then Anish, our son, was in the first cohort. So that was kind of fun to see too. But yeah, so those sort of things, are, having more money in this bucket, you can do legacy stuff with. My third bucket, as I call it, my angel investing bucket. So I'm one of the more active angels in town, do a lot of mentoring and judging business plans and that kind of stuff. But, when I invest in an entrepreneur early stage, obviously I don't want to lose money, but it's not so driven by wanting to make money. It's more about seeding someone, getting them or her, him going. So then hopefully they can have some success and have some financial freedom and some time freedom. So then they can go fund another entrepreneur or a charitable cause. So I'm trying to replicate, multiply, build the ecosystem. And even with the angel investing, I go, look, my 25, 50 grand, whatever check isn't going to change your life. What you really want is advice, guidance, contacts. So anyways, and that's been going really well. And partly because I shifted my model from just, purely starting as angel investor to a mentor first. So I like to mentor, and it's kind of like a walk before you run model, because I really get to know the company, the industry, the entrepreneur from the inside without stroking a check. And then eventually the conversation turns to, we need to raise money, and they naturally know you so well. And then, they really want your cap tables. You can actually cut a better deal. And the other key thing you learn too through that approach is how mentorable and coachable someone is, which is also important, right? And then my final bucket, my fourth bucket, is I call it my random acts of kindness bucket, where, just bleep off money. You can do whatever you want, right? So, for example, one of my personal trainers was taking a holiday, and, she hadn't taken one a long time, student loans. And I'm like, here's a couple of $100 cash, just have a nice, dinner and a bottle of wine on me, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then, I just turned 60, which is like a big number. It's like, oh man, I kind of feel like I'm now on the other side of the hill. But I've had friends, probably like you, that have retired between 50 and 60, let's say. And I'm like, retired to what? Like, take your gifts and bottle them up and stop. Right. And so I'm, like my father, he's 83, still works every day. And so I'm going to keep going as long as I can. And then, some people think, well, you got to retire so you could travel and play pickleball. And I'm like, I already do both of those things, right? So it's like, I don't need to retire. And we can also go down the pickleball rabbit hole.
We very much can. We very much can. I think, what I loved about you sharing this is you have a lifestyle philosophy that is very clear. You can very easily list off the 4 buckets that matter to you. And I know you really well. I've witnessed you are a man of action, and it matches your values. Like, just those buckets are your values, and you have lived those the whole time I've known you. And the other thing you've done, though, too, which you didn't touch on, is, you're a fantastic networker. Sometimes that word is, I don't know, it feels like it's not quite the right word for you, because, sometimes I think people think of a networker as somebody who goes to places and like hands out business cards and, and you're not that person, right? You are a person that people trust and respect, and you have influence, and people are willing to listen to you. And so when you decide that you want to put your time and energy behind something that has impact, you're able to raise awareness around it with the people that trust and respect you. And so, one, you could just give money and go, okay, well, I gave money, I raised some money, and I slept overnight for Covenant House. I've done my thing. But what you actually did was you did that, plus you brought some of your buddies with you, and then they raised money. And I've seen you do this time and time again, where you've decided, do you want to dive all in? And then you tap into your network and say, hey, this matters to me. This should matter to you too. Here's why it matters. Here's why it matters to our community. And then you have gone and enrolled others in that same pursuit. And I think that's one thing that you didn't touch on today that I really admire about you, and I've seen you do time and time again.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And people ask me, so like, what's your biggest strength, right? And so, I'm an accountant, but my dad would tell you I was a lousy accountant, right? I would have started if I stayed an accountant. But I would say, yeah, my ability to build relationships quickly and deeply and maintain them on a long-term basis is, what it is. And so I'm constantly, using and relying on and this global network I've created, and even with our 2 kids, like we've taught them, some of the same issues. When they were younger, we would say, hey, like, don't worry about your marks. Like, there's too much focus on marks. Your marks aren't ultimately going to determine how happy you're going to be, like how successful. And having said that, it's not a license to bleep the dog, right? Like, you got
no, exactly.
And I think by reversing the pressure, it actually worked, because they both got into solder, which is really hard, right? And then we really tried to teach them about, these interpersonal skills, the stuff they don't teach you at school that's going to make you happy and successful, right? And then, kind of winding back the clock, like when I started at UBC, I was in sciences, I failed physics, it was hard, I went into business. Like, my whole career was kind of bob and weave, the CPA, I didn't like accounting, became an entrepreneur. But when I was at UBC, like, I met so many new students, and my head was hurting, because I'm like, I can barely remember your name, let alone anything about you, right? And so, I basically created this, it's like my manual CRM. Like, I literally had a notebook, 3-ring binder thingies that we all had, right? And I'd write your name on top, and I'd write some things I learned about you, right? And then when I met you again, I could ask new stuff and learn more about you, and kind of keep adding a little bit to what I was learning about you. Because the problem was, if I met you again 1 month later, 3 months later, and if I could remember what I learned the first time, it's like starting from scratch. I go, what town did you're from Trail? Oh, yeah. And then when I graduated, one of the first business books I read was called Swim with the Sharks by a guy named Harvey McKay.
It's such a great book. And if I think I know where you're going, you're going to talk about the McKay 66.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So then, anyways, I'm reading this book, multimillionaire envelope, entrepreneur from Minnesota, and he basically said, like, to staff, you need to have these 66 questions with, answers on them for every customer and every prospect, right? Basically, it's describing kind of like what I was building. So I'm like, okay, this guy's basically saying to keep doing what I just figured out on my own I should do. And he's a multimillionaire. Like, I should just double down and keep doing that, right? And then, I don't know if you remember this, but when I was EO president, I brought Harvey up here to speak. Right?
Yeah.
Because he was kind of like one of my first sort of business role model hero kind of things, right? And then I think part of why this became so important to me is I just have a natural curiosity and interest in people's stories, right? And so, I mean, not everybody's like that, right? And so when I'm mentoring entrepreneurs, and I'm meeting them for the first time, let's say, they start diving into the company and the issue. I'm like, whoa, dude, like, hang on, time out. I just met you. I don't even know you. and so I've got a 3-step process and it takes time. And partly it's my philosophy and attitude that when I start a relationship, I'm already thinking it's going to be hopefully the beginnings of a long-term relationship. Right. So I'm investing that bit of extra time at the front end. Right. So step 1 is always like something like, hey, well, tell me about yourself. Like, where were you born? What did you study? What were some of your first jobs? What kind of environment, did you grow up in? Like, what did your parents do? That kind of stuff. Right. That's step 1. Step 2 is, okay, tell me about the now. Okay. So what's your company? When did you start it? Why did you start it? Right. And then step 3 is where you're trying to get to. With that foundation of 1 and 2, I find I'm much more able to help, provide a piece of advice, guidance, or a contact to help you on your journey. And so, these young entrepreneurs, especially when I meet them, like they love it. They're like, oh my God, like, we thought you're some busy exec that's, like 5 minutes, you spit you out and you're on to the next guy, right? And like, you actually are taking time to care and learn about me, right? And I think part of how I got shaped there too was I remember when I was at my old firm, KPMG, and you're this little peon, you're walking out of the elevator to your cubicle, right? You got to pass all these partners in their corner offices and you're, narrow hallways, and literally the partner's walking right by you and they're not even looking in the eye. And I can still remember the feeling to that day. It was like, okay, well, you may not care about me, but can you at least learn my name? Just like a good morning, Praveen, would have been nice. and so that was one of the things we taught our kids was learn people's names and use them often, right?
The thing I learned from the Harvey McKay, and I appreciate you bringing up that example, is the reality that the earlier you build your network and the more sincere you are about truly getting to know people and understanding who they are as a human being, not what they can do for you or if we can work together or whatever it is, but like genuinely caring about who they are as a human being, that your network becomes your net worth.
Correct.
There's a direct connection between that.
For sure.
And I feel like that's a perfect place for us to wrap this episode, because you are a walking example of taking something that is a system. And most people would say, well, that's like a very deliberate system for your relationships. And it's like, right, it is, except only because you care a lot.
Right.
Because the other choice is just don't do it.
Yeah.
And then when you see that person again, you won't have the depth of that relationship. So I appreciate you bringing that in as our final piece to chat about today. And, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed being in conversation with you, as I have for the 30 plus years that we've known each other.
No, thank you, Mike. That was a lot of fun. And, great that you've been, doing this podcast and sharing, all this great stuff you're learning from all your guests and, allowing me an opportunity to share some things that I talk about, sometimes one-on-one or small groups, but to have a broader audience, hopefully can benefit from some of these things we talked about is, it'll be great.